In 1898, Animal Intelligence, an experimental study of the associative processes in animals, was published by Thorndike. Thorndike's pioneering experiments with cats in the late 19th and early 20th centuries laid the foundation for the study of animal behavior and learning theory. In this experiment, Thorndike placed a hungry cat inside a specially designed box. The box had a door that could be opened by manipulating a latch or pulling a string, allowing the cat to escape and access food placed outside the box. However, initially the cat did not know how to open the door and would often struggle to find a way out. Through trial and error, the cat would eventually discover the correct sequence of actions needed to open the door and escape. Once the cat successfully opened the door and obtained the food, Thorndike would place it back in the box and repeat the process. Thorndike observed that with each trial, the cat became faster and more efficient at escaping the box. This demonstrated the principle of law of effect, which states that behavior followed by favorable consequences are more likely to be repeated in the future, while behaviors followed by unfavorable consequences are less likely to be repeated. Based on his observations, Thorndike formulated his law of effect, which became a fundamental principle in the field of psychology. This law laid the groundwork for later behaviorists like B.F. Skinner and paved the way for modern theories of learning and conditioning. Connectionism. Thorndike first stated the elements of his theory of learning in 1913, that connections are formed in the nervous system between stimuli and response. These connections formed are illustrated by the symbol SR. Another word used to describe these connections is the word bond, and hence this theory is sometimes called a bond theory of learning. Thorndike has written, "Learning is connecting. The mind is man's connection system." Trial and error method. According to Thorndike, learning takes place by trial and error. Some people call it learning by selection of the successful variant. In trial and error method, the learner makes random activities and finally reaches the goal accidentally. Here, one thing should be remembered, that in trial and error also, there are often systematic and relevant responses. Activities are not wholly random. All these activities, though apparently random, are suggested to him by the situation and the learner proceeds on accordingly. Thorndike formulated three laws to explain the process of learning through trial and error. The first law is law of readiness. This law emphasizes that learning is most effective when the learner is ready and motivated to learn. It suggests that individuals are more likely to learn when they are psychologically prepared and motivated to engage in the learning process. Consider a student who is genuinely interested in a particular subject and is eager to learn. This student is more likely to be attentive, engage with the material, and actively seek out opportunities to learn compared to a student who lacks interest or motivated in the subject. According to the law of readiness, the motivated student is in a better state to learn and absorb new information effectively. Now, law of exercise. This law states that connections between a stimulus and response are strengthened through practice or repetition, and they weaken when practice is discontinued. The more frequently a stimulus and responses are paired, the stronger the association becomes. Suppose a rat is placed in a maze and learns to navigate to find food at the end of the maze. Each time the rat successfully completes the maze, the connections between the stimulus, that is the maze layout, and the response, that is navigation to find food, is strengthened. With repeated practice, the rat becomes more efficient at navigating the maze, demonstrating the strengthening of the association through exercise. The law of exercise is divided into two parts, that is law of use and law of disuse. According to the law of use, in the words of Thorndike, when a modificable connection is made between a situation and response, that connection's strength is, other things being equal, increased. According to the law of disuse, again in the words of Thorndike, when modificable connection is not made between a situation and response during a length to the time, that connection strength is decreased. Now, law of effect. This law states that behaviors followed by favorable consequences are more likely to be repeated, while behaviors followed by unfavorable consequences are less likely to be repeated. In other words, the consequences of an action influence the likelihood of that action being repeated in the future. In Thorndike's puzzle box experiments, when a cat's action, such as pressing a lever, resulted in the door opening and accessing food, that is favorable consequence, the cat learned to associate that action with the reward and was more likely to be repeated in subsequent trial. Conversely, actions that did not result in the door opening and accessing food, which is unfavorable consequence, were less likely to be repeated. So these three laws of learning provide a framework for understanding how behaviors are acquired and maintained through the interaction between stimuli, response, and consequences. They have significant implications for educational practice, behavior modification techniques, and understanding human and animal behavior. After the publication of Animal Intelligence, Thorndike turned his attention to human intelligence. In his opinion, the most basic intelligence is characterized by simple stimulus and response association, resulting in a neural connection. The more intelligent an animal, the more capable it will be of making such connections. Therefore, intelligence can be defined in terms of ability to form neural bonds, which is dependent not only on genetic factors but also on experience. Now, measurement of human intelligence. To find a measurement of human intelligence, Thorndike devised his CAVD, that is completion, arithmetic, vocabulary, and directions test. It became the model for all modern intelligence tests and assess mechanical intelligence, that is understanding of how things work, as well as abstract intelligence, that is creative ability, and social intelligence, that is interpersonal skills. Thorndike was especially interested in how age might affect learning and also proposed a theory of learning that remains at the heart of educational psychology to this day, a contribution that in perhaps what Thorndike would have wished more than anything else to be remembered for. However, it is for his enormous influence on the behaviorist movement that Thorndike is most often lauded. According to Edward Thorndike, the following are the secondary law of learning. The law of primacy emphasizes that learning that occurs at the beginning is often the strongest and the most lasting. First impressions and initial learning experiences tend to have a significant impact on subsequent learning. In a language class, the first few lessons where the students are introduced to basic vocabulary and grammar structure are crucial. The foundational knowledge acquired in these initial lessons forms the basis for more advanced language skills. Law of recency. This law suggests that the most recent learning experiences are better remembered and have a lasting impact. Information learned recently is more likely to be recalled compared to the information learned earlier. Before an exam, students often engage in last-minute revision to refresh their memory of key concepts and information. The material reviewed just before the exam is more likely to be retained and recalled during the test. Law of intensity of stimulus. This law states that the strength of the stimulus influences the strength of the response. Strong stimuli evoke strong response, while weak stimuli evoke weaker responses. A teacher who presents a lesson with enthusiasm and energy is more likely to be capture students' attention and engagement compared to a teacher who delivers the same material in a monotone voice. The intensity of the teacher's presentation affects students' level of interest and learning. Law of multiple response. This law suggests that when faced with a new situation, individuals may respond in various ways before arriving at the correct response. There can be multiple paths to the correct answer or solution. When solving a complex math problem, a student may initially attempt different strategies or approaches before finding the most effective method to solve the problem. Each attempted response contributes to the learning process. Law of set attitude. This law highlights the importance of having a positive attitude and mindset towards a task or learning activity. When learners approach a task with a positive attitude, they are more likely to perform well. A student who believes in their ability to succeed in challenging course is more likely to engage actively in learning activities, seek help when needed, and persist through difficulties compared to a student who lacks confidence or has a negative attitude. Law of analogy and assimilation. This law suggests that learners make connections and understand new information better when they can relate it to their existing knowledge or experiences. A science teacher explaining the concept of photosynthesis may use analogies to help students understand the process better. Comparing photosynthesis to cooking in kitchen where sunlight is the stove, carbon dioxide is the ingredient and oxygen is the product can help students assimilate and comprehend the concept more effectively. Law of associative shifting. According to this law, learners can produce various responses depending on the situation they encounter. Different stimuli may evoke different responses from the learner. A student may demonstrate different behaviors in various classroom settings based on factors such as the teacher's teaching style, the subject being taught, or the presence of peers. For instance, a student may be more participative and engaged in a hands-on science class but more reserved in a lecture-based history class. Law of partial activity. This law suggests that complex tasks or concepts should be broken down into smaller parts to facilitate learning, particularly in children's education. When teaching young children to read, educators often use phonic instruction, breaking down words into individual sounds and teaching them one step at a time. By focusing on one aspect of reading at a time, children gradually build their reading skills through partial activities. These examples illustrate how Thorndike's secondary law of learning contribute to our understanding of learning process and how educators can apply these principles to enhance teaching and learning experience. Now try this.